industry on parade. A pictorial review of events in business and industry, produced each week by the National Association of Manufacturers. A thrilling new chapter for the American transportation story. It's the airline that carries only freight. At air terminals all over the country, they're making room for this fast-growing infant of the aviation industry. From the beginning, the country's aviation industry has always carried assorted merchandise. But until the war, this was a sideline to the passenger business. Then came the need for transporting essential war materials far and fast, and the air freight business bloomed. After the war, hundreds of Army and Navy flyers decided air freight was the coming thing, an opportunity to pioneer in a brand new business. Scores of air freight companies were formed, some with as few as one Army surplus DC-3. Only those capable of supplying the service the country had come to expect from its passenger airlines stuck it out. Some firms, like Slick Airways of San Antonio, Texas, were able to answer the nation's real need, and as a result, have doubled their operations in a single year. Hauling everything and anything, including the tractors here being loaded at Detroit, the air freight lines offered speed of delivery. They found thousands of customers, large and small, who wanted to get their goods to distant cities in a hurry. Now operating on regular schedules, the freight-only airlines have been able to add another service, dependability. Having proved themselves in carrying supplies to Korea, the air freight lines take their place alongside the rail, truck, and water systems as a definite part of the American transportation system.
You know, when industry is busier than ever turning out goods for war or defense, it may be natural to think it's making big profits. But there's no profit in war for business or for anyone else for that matter. As to corporation profits, they were cut in half during World War II. Figures show that they dropped to an average of 3% on sales compared to an average profit of 6% during the 3 years preceding the war. No matter how you look at it, war is bad business for everyone.
At Irvington, New Jersey, one of the most remarkable companies in the nation is benefiting from the great number of boys born during and after World War II. It's the Lionel Corporation, maker of toy electric trains. As fast as they can mold, stamp, and assemble the parts, Lionel workers strive to satisfy the demands of American youngsters as well as the just plain young of heart. It's largely a Christmas business, toy train making, but to manufacture the number of realistic miniatures needed, Lionel must keep producing throughout the year. The tiny wheels and other parts are made exactly to scale. In fact, Lionel uses the same blueprints used by the builders of full-size trains, for the major railroads are proud to have one of their new locomotives reproduced. And for the railroad bug, everything must be exactly as it is on the main line. The first toy electric train produced by Joshua Lionel Cowan, the company's president, was just an open wooden flat car carrying a tiny battery-powered motor. That was in 1900. From the beginning, Cowan insisted his toy trains must run on electricity, for, he said, who ever saw a regular train that had to be wound up? The one outstanding characteristic of Lionel operations can be summarized in the word realism. With every unit a model of a full-size train, that means even the paint job must conform to reality. Lionel typifies what's been happening in America's toy industry generally in recent years. Tremendous production in 1949, has had to be greatly increased in 1950. Lionel was an important producer of delicate military equipment during the war and could convert again. But they'd far rather go right on turning out the toy trains that bring light to the eye of the American male of any age. Here we see being assembled the little trucks that will carry the trains along their tracks. Sections of track are spotted throughout the plant, so that at all stages of production the cars can be sent on a trial spin. The tracks themselves are also assembled here, partly by hand, partly by machine. Formerly of brass, now they're made of steel, so they will hold magnetized wheels on steep grades. More than 1,500 miles of track a year is the current rate of production. A large part of the business of keeping model railroad fans happy lies in the making of accessories. Crossing gates, houses for the gatemen, water towers. There are dozens of items needed for a realistic layout. In the testing lab, trains run continuously day and night until they break down. In this way, it's determined which part will wear out first, and the designers immediately set to work on a better part to replace it. So, as the cows enter their cattle car, and the milk comes out of the refrigerator car, and the signal is given to let her roll, all hands can be sure everything is strictly according to Hoyle.
The New York Stock and Curb Exchanges, marketplace for America. Here the millions of men and women who own American industry find full facilities for investing in the stocks and bonds that represent shares in America's future. Meet Barbara Gilder of the brokerage firm of Dreyfus & Company, who demonstrates the increasingly important place of women in the world of finance. Her title, Customer's Man. Her job, advising the company's clients on the proper handling of their investments.
Change in the action of the stock. Thank you. Bye. Good to see you again, Mr. Burns.
Glad to see you again, Miss Gilder.
Oh, here's that portfolio of your securities that the research department's prepared for us. I've spoken over in great detail with them, and I agree completely with their conclusions and suggestions. We feel that these securities in List A are perhaps slightly too speculative for an account like yours, Mr. Burns. There's nothing the matter with the securities, but I think you'd probably be better off in something more conservative. We think that perhaps you might consider switching into some of these securities here in Section B. Now, the research department has given you write-ups of most of those stocks, and you might want to read them to see what we are suggesting.
Well, I think that makes pretty good sense to me, Miss Gilder. I have to be conservative with my money.
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Hello? Hello? Oh, good morning, Mr. Miller. Yes. The market is considerably firmer this morning. U.S. Steel's up an eighth of a point. Republic's up an eighth of a point. Motors is unchanged. Standard is up a quarter. Just a minute, I'll close that for you. Excuse me. It's quarter 33 and an eighth, 3/8. Yes, fine. I'll put in an order to buy 200 at 3/8, and I'll call you back in a few minutes to let you know whether we get it or not. Well, thanks for calling. Bye.
Well, let me think about this tonight and give you a ring in the morning. It looks very good to me, and I'll call you.
Fine, Mr. Burns. Thanks an awful lot for coming in. Bye.
Barbara is confident of her own and her country's future.
America's oldest drugstore, the apothecary shop of William Pasteur, is reconstructed at Williamsburg, Virginia. A resident of the colonial village in authentic colonial costume comes calling on the good chemist to stock her family's medicine chest. Everything in the shop, from the clerk on duty to the bottles of pills and powders on the shelves, are precisely as they were when the apothecary shop was built 190 years ago. It's a far cry from the well-stocked modern drugstore of today, but even before the Revolutionary War, druggists sold more than just drugs. Perfume, snuff, tea, cosmetics, soap, candy, and spice were also on sale. They're all on display here in the original containers, and some can still be purchased. As in modern days, the apothecary of great-great-great-grandfather's time also had a tobacco counter. But there was a difference. No carefully processed and neatly packaged cigars and cigarettes as we know them. In those days, they bought their tobacco by the twist. It was so strong you had to stay a foot away from it. The men who mixed the nostrums and potions that passed for medicine in colonial days were proud of their limited equipment, and they might have been even prouder had they known their stumbling efforts to relieve the sufferings of their fellow men would grow into the modern pharmaceutical industry of today. At Grand Central Palace in New York, a half-century of progress is celebrated by the manufacturers of office equipment, who display an amazing array of labor-saving machines for the business house. Among them, the Wheel of Wheels, a filing system in keeping with the age of electronics. The pack tire ties bundles of letters and packages together in nothing flat. And there's even equipment on view for the benefit of handicapped workers being employed by industry in ever-growing numbers. This is the remote control typewriter for the bedridden or those confined to wheelchairs. The automatic page turner, another aid for the handicapped, operates by pressing the chin against a lever suspended around the neck. Even the office desk has gone mechanical. After the combination lock is opened, the top of the desk swings open to reveal a safe, a deep freeze for those frozen assets. And the height of labor-saving devices, the auto pen. Just jot down your signature and the auto pen will copy it over and over and over again. One of these, a copy of the signature of the Aga Khan, and brother, you're on Easy Street. To the Bell and Howell plant at Lincolnwood, Illinois, an order from Uncle Sam. Bigger, even more powerful camera lenses for high-altitude photo reconnaissance, and more of them. Aerial observation behind the enemy lines is one of the key facets of military intelligence. The higher the planes can fly and still get photos that mean something, the more pictures they can take, and the safer the men aboard those aircraft. So these veteran manufacturers of photographic equipment go to work. The glass blank, rough milled to a tolerance of 2/1000ths of an inch, now is ground to a more precise 2/10,000ths. During and after each of the many operations, the element is measured again and again with instruments that are checked daily against master gauges. Perhaps nowhere else in industry is such extreme precision considered workaday routine. After polishing, the element gets the first of a series of final tests to make sure it's mathematically perfect. On this device, the slightest deviation would be instantly apparent. The elements are washed and again inspected, this time for absolute cleanliness. Then they're assembled into a cell. It takes 3 elements to make a cell and 2 cells to make a lens. As the elements are added, the greatest care must be taken to keep the glass immaculate, since even a fingerprint would prevent the lens from doing its job properly. This is the sort of careful attention these craftsmen have been lavishing on civilian camera equipment for many years, of course. So when the Air Force asks for bigger and more powerful lenses, that just means much more of the same. The second element goes in. Between the elements are metal rings, spacer rings, that also must be accurate to the tiniest fraction of an inch. The principle behind any lens is that of channeling light rays to form an image. A principle that's simple enough, but when you get into the extreme magnification necessary to photograph tanks or even troops some 7 miles away, then it's no longer quite so simple. The Germans used to have a virtual monopoly on this sort of work, but no more. The retaining ring is screwed in place, and now the cell is ready to be mounted with its partner on the optical test bench. In a camera, the two cells will be set up in a closed tube, but the tube is only to exclude light, and the accuracy of the lens can be determined without it. The lens is focused on a chart, somewhat like the test pattern you often see on your television screen. They photograph it with the cells in various positions to ensure that the lens will take perfect pictures, whether the target is 10,000 feet away, 20,000, or whatever the range. They take 27 pictures in all. During World War II, many an airman lost his life flying low over enemy territory to photograph bomb damage, troop disposition, and other equally vital information not otherwise available. Now they get better pictures at safer altitudes with one plane doing the work of several. The photographs taken on the test bench are analyzed. Under the microscope, the resolution or clarity of the picture at each of the 27 settings is noted. Variation is allowed between only the narrowest of limits. And when it finally is okayed, out it goes to be mounted in a camera like this. A monster seeing eye that can pass overhead and record virtually everything below, while itself remaining unobserved except by radar. And here's the result, a snapshot taken from literally miles away.
American employees are better informed than their counterparts anywhere else in the world. Industry is constantly improving employee-employer understanding through face-to-face contacts, employee opinion polls, company publications, bulletin boards, and in-plant meetings. Each year, thousands of employees contribute to the suggestion system set up by management. Such a free and steady flow of facts and opinions, both to and from employees, helps bring about better understanding, cooperation, and harmony in working relationships.
Industry on Parade stops off at a goober factory in Columbus, Georgia. What's a goober? Why, it's a ground nut, or perhaps you know it as a peanut. At the Tom Houston Peanut Company, that's about all they deal in. Thousands of tons of peanuts a year, which after roasting will be processed and marketed in a dozen different ways. Here are roasted the shelled Spanish peanuts, which actually originated not in Spain, but in South America. Sorted first mechanically by means of electric eye, the nuts still must be gone over by hand to eliminate the few remaining imperfect specimens. After blanching, toasting in coconut oil and salting, they're ready to be packaged. The label is attached and away they go to be boxed. Jumbo peanuts are bagged and the bags sealed in an operation that's entirely automatic. The Stokes wrapping machine not only makes its own bags and measures out exactly the right amount, but can even distinguish between peanuts with hulls and those without. But only a part of the crop is sold as whole peanuts. An equal part goes into peanut candy of various kinds. Development of a distributing organization that blankets 38 states has led the firm into production of a number of non-peanut confections. But the goober is still king. After cooking, the candy is poured out on marble slabs to cool. peanut planks are cut and gathered for transfer to the wrapping department. The first recorded cultivation of peanuts was in 16th century Peru, where Spanish adventurers found the Indians growing and processing them, much as we do today, even to the grinding of them for peanut butter. But the early Peruvians never even dreamed of methods like these. From its modest beginning, the peanut has grown until today. It's one of our most important farm commodities, with consumption now running over 2 billion pounds a year. A few of those pounds may have gone to our feathered friends, but here's most of them went.
Thomas A. Edison Incorporated, West Orange, New Jersey. Just one of many important American corporations founded on the inventions of a genius who labored long and fruitfully in this modest laboratory, now a national shrine. Under the direction of the company's president and its research director, the unceasing quest for knowledge carried on for so many years in this room still continues without let-up, even though it's been nearly a quarter of a century since the death of the man who once used this desk, which incidentally remains exactly as Thomas Edison left it. Here was invented the phonograph, the electric light, motion pictures. And here in the new Edison Research Laboratory, they go on seeking and finding new ways in which industry can better our way of life. In the first public showing of a discovery of this laboratory, we see a demonstration of an amazing heat-sensitive cable that promises to revolutionize fire detection systems. From the jar, the cable connects to extinguishing apparatus, and within seconds after the flame first touches the cable, the fire is out. Able to stand temperatures up to 2,000 degrees, the cable remains unaffected by minor blazes and continues in service indefinitely. The lives and property it will save can only be guessed, for engineers have just begun to uncover applications for the remarkable product of industrial research in the finest tradition of Thomas A. Edison.
Productivity is one of the keystones of American progress. Productivity is the end result of men in good health, working with modern machinery in good repair, operated by management with goodwill. Men, machines, and management are employed by the savings of people invested in a machine shop, store, farm, or factory. Productivity is greatest when management is able, and both employees and investors are well paid for their investments of time and savings. Increased productivity helps reduce costs and prices, increases wages and salaries, and enables all of us to enjoy higher living standards.
Dallon's Laboratories in Hollywood, nationally known manufacturers of electromedical and electrosurgical apparatus, electronic equipment, and other scientific gear. It was probably inevitable, doing this kind of work and being located here, that the movie and television industry should call on them for apparatus for the experiments of such eminent researchers as Boris Karloff and Captain Video. A lot of the equipment supplied to the studios by Oscar, Paul, and Franz Dallons has been the genuine thing to be used in films about genuine scientists. But the biggest demand by the world of make-believe is for apparatus that just looks scientific. This mad concoction, for example. Sometimes there's more work involved in fabricating a make-believe machine than there is in putting together one that would actually serve a useful purpose. But the highly skilled craftsmen get almost as much satisfaction out of keeping up with the wild dreams of Hollywood scriptwriters as they do from following the deadly serious blueprint of electronics engineers. Actually, Hollywood demands considerable authenticity, even in machines that have not yet been invented. They say to Dallons, if a device were to be perfected that could suspend life, or read the mind, or communicate with Mars, what would it look like? The firm's experience in the production of legitimate scientific equipment helps them come up with a likely answer. Want a rocket ride to outer space? Climb aboard, we're blasting off. Want to call in a flying saucer? Turn on 2 million volts and stand back. Watch your step, brother. We've got you covered with our supersonic, interplanetary, cosmic ray disintegrator. And here's the cubicle in which Superman was created. Trouble with these things is the adjustments have to be just right, or out comes Supergirl. They may not look like it, but these men are laboratory workers testing the key product of the Cushman Motor Works of Lincoln, Nebraska. That product is, of course, scooters, which are assuming a new, much more important role in American life, and now must really be able to take it. That's one reason why Cushman manufactures just about all the parts for its scooters right here in its own plant. These are engine blocks, for example, for the Husky engine, arriving in the machine shop to be milled, drilled, tapped, bored, and reamed. A lot of words meaning simply that its various surfaces are brought to the proper smoothness and size. The cylinder walls get a mirror-like finish. Cylinder heads are made of an aluminum alloy. They, too, must be machined for a snug fit. Many of the parts must next be heat-treated in order to have the required physical characteristics. Electricity heats the part. Then jets of cold water quickly cool it. This induction method, as it's called, accurately controls the depth of the hardness. The great machine shop here at Cushman is about as well equipped as any you're likely to find. And visitors are sometimes surprised to see such a complex industrial plant and its many skilled workers in the heart of what is usually thought of as a farming area. By means of several different conveyor systems, the parts converge on stations where they're put together as sub-assemblies. Here, various parts are added to the motor. The flywheel has been added, and now the cylinder head goes on. In straight-line production, each worker adds another part with no fumbling or other wasted motion. It's the same in the building where the scooter frame, fork, and other parts are being assembled. Welding slag is chipped off, and the surface is buffed clean by one worker. Then the piece moves on to another who installs the seat. The rear fender is set in place. Just 4 years ago, 90% of Cushman scooters were used strictly for pleasure. Now, 50% perform very useful jobs, as in making light deliveries or running personnel and equipment around large industrial plants. The armed forces use a lot of them, and even the post office department is experimenting with them as a means of taking a big load off the feet of America's letter carriers. In line with this new dignity, the manufacturer would prefer the word truckster to the old name scooter. These scooters, trucksters that is, don't just seem to be of different sizes and shapes. They are. The company produces 50 different models for all the various uses being found for this versatile machine. Here we see the last of a great many inspections and test runs to which it's subjected both before final assembly and afterward. So, from the capital of Nebraska to all parts of the country, of which it's at the very center, go additional thousands of sturdy little vehicles each year.
During many past presidential elections, nearly half of America's eligible voters failed to cast their ballots. Now it has been said that poor officials are elected by supposedly good people who do not vote. Yet in this country, the ballot is the citizen's weapon to ensure good government and correct abuses of power or position. In the interest of our country, every eligible voter should closely examine political candidates and the things they stand for. Then vote wisely in every local, state, and national election.
Here's a beauty of a home at Scarsdale, New York, that's known as the plastic house. No, the walls and roof aren't made of plastic, but practically everything inside is. Curtains and drapes, for example. And tabletops that resist burns. Not only the fabric that covers furniture, but even the structural parts of the chair as well. The folding doors to the study, which Milady enters to make a phone call on a telephone whose case is also made of plastic, a substance that so aroused the interest of the New York industrial designers Lippincott and Margulies that they set up Plastic House as a demonstration of what can be done with it. Not that they confine their interest to plastics alone. Here are just a few of the products and packages whose appearance was transformed by these designers to enhance their appeal to the American public. W.P. Margulies is one of the men who has proved that sometimes even a very slight alteration of the shape, color, size, or packaging of a product can make a world of difference in how that product will be accepted by the public. The firm has built up a large staff of artists, architects, and other experts who must take a product they know is necessary and beneficial and make it look that way. They found, for example, that brightening up the label of a popular line of soups caused thousands of additional shoppers to decide today's the day to have soup for lunch. The hand-painted label will get a thorough study and testing before it's accepted. A soap manufacturer found that his rounded bar was too prone to slip from the grasp. So the industrial designers, working with wood, came up with a bar that retained the rounded edges but wasn't so elusive in the bathtub. But vastly more dramatic industrial designing goes on behind closed doors at Lippincott and Margulies, where work proceeds on such projects as the atom-powered submarine. Alteration of appearance is by no means the chief function of industrial design. The people of firms like this devote much less time to prettying up a product than they do making it more compact, convenient to use, and sometimes less expensive to manufacture. In any case, theirs is an important place in the nation's industrial scene.
Ever read a book of Shepard's citations? Not likely unless you're a lawyer, in which case you refer to these volumes almost every working day of your life. They're books put out here at Shepard's Citations Incorporated in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to guide the lawyers of the land through the maze of laws and past court cases, which might have a bearing on a new case in which similar issues are raised. To Shepard's come copies of every law publication and every reference by a judge to a law. These are analyzed to determine their significance, then cross-indexed for ready reference. The assembled material is set up in type for inclusion in one of more than 60 national, state, and regional books of citations. From the typesetting machines, the lines of type will go to the composing room to be assembled into columns and the columns into pages. 16 pages are locked in one form to be printed at one time, then cut apart later after being bound into volumes. Interspersed with the new information are lines from previous issues that are still applicable. After proofreaders have checked every word, the presses go into action. The pressman makes sure all pages are being printed uniformly. The sheets, larger than newspapers, are folded to book page size at the rate of 2,000 an hour. And here's how the pages are assembled in the right order, after which they are stitched together and bound in leather covers. The only publication of its kind in the world, Shepard's Citations has in 80 years become an integral part of the American legal system.
We Americans have more individual freedoms than any other people in the world. and are free to act as we wish, provided, of course, that our actions do not curtail the liberties and freedoms of others. Action which limits economic freedom also reduces political and individual freedoms. To preserve our individual freedoms, we must keep a watchful eye on proposed changes in our business system, viewing each proposal as to its immediate effects compared to its long-range effects.
Industry on Parade drops in on Fred Opliger, a man with a very specialized calling indeed. Stained glass windows are the product of his firm, the Jacoby Art Glass Company of St. Louis. Mr. Opliger introduces us to some of the craftsmen who create the impressive windows of colored glass that enhance museums, churches, and libraries. Craftsmen like the man who transfers the design for the window onto heavy paper, a process known as cartooning. The paper is cut out in the shape of each of the pieces of glass that will go into the window. Allowance must be made and space left for the leads that will go between the pieces of glass and hold them together. The parts of the jigsaw puzzle are set in place one by one. The color of each part is known in advance, of course, but the task of selecting the precise shade is a demanding one. There might be as many as 50 different shades of a single color. Jacoby prides itself on having the most complete stock of colored glass in the world. The glass selected is cut by a man who uses the paper cartoons as his patterns. If you've ever cut a piece of glass for even a basement window, you'll realize what an expert he is. Where lettering is called for, pigments are painted on to be fused into the glass later in a kiln. Now the jigsaw is reassembled in glass. The pieces will be held together temporarily with beeswax. The easel on which they rest is clear plate glass, so the section can be raised to the light while pigments are added for further shading. After being taken apart and annealed in the kiln, the pieces are assembled for a third time, this time with lead in place of the wax. Supporting cross pieces known as wind bars are soldered in place, and the sections are ready for installation in such impressive structures as the Armstrong Browning Library of Baylor University in Waco, Texas. Illustrations in glass of the works of the famous poet Robert Browning, these windows are themselves truly works of art.